Alright, hello everyone. So as promised, here's the discussion. As I did a little more on the dance videos, as you want to call it, though one of them was an extension of the other, but I ain't gonna let that stop me, and my legs feel like jelly, but thankfully I got some Gatorade here, so should help me be able to get this video in. So anyway, I guess right off the bat, this will be a history mainly on the dumbass stigma of comic books being considered childish, and how I'm getting fucking tired of this perception, and how morons like Frederick Wortham, who we will go into in this video, Frederick Wortham, there was really nobody in the 80s, because that was another bad decade to be a geek. Can't really remember. Nobody really in that decade. But those who were misinformed, I guess. And, and recently with Martin Scorsese and Bill Maher and everything. So I guess I'm going to go ahead and get this right out of the gate. What Bill Maher said about Stan Lee and the geek community, I don't care what anyone says about how he likes to stir the pot. What you said there, Bill, about Stan Lee, his legacy, and the geek community mourning his loss, an absolute fucking legend. Well, here's what I gotta say to you, Bill Maher. Fuck you, Bill Maher. You old, short-sighted jackass. Ugh! I can't believe we still gotta deal like morons like you. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the beginning of this. And, this will be covering comics, film, from about the early comic book days, from the Golden Age up until now in the modern age and this most recent decade. So, without further ado, so yeah, comic books really started with the beginning of the first actual superhero being Superman, who had superpowers, as we know it today, with him debuting in Action Comics #1. And not sponsored, I'm just enjoying this Gatorade because I need it. Oh boy, my legs are killing me. But that's besides the point. So yeah, this is when characters like Wonder Woman, Captain America, Spider-Man, not Spider-Man, Superman, and Namor the Submariner were created, and the comics were done to capture on the patriotic feeling of World War II, and also America feeling superior after dethroning England as the best equipped nation militarily wise and all that. And right around this time in the 1950s, Frederick Wortham, this first guy who I watched the video on, he's not as bad as I thought, but I'm still worked up that he caused this witch hunt and indirectly caused this stupid-ass perception of comic books being for children that I'm fucking tired of dealing with, and I really want to live in a world where this is not a fucking issue. Especially when I walk around the street in my favorite Spider-Man shirt, or shirts like these, and people are giving me looks and being all like, what the fuck are you wearing a Spider-Man shirt for? Or this one lady who was all like, Spider-Man, really? Grow the fuck up. And I'm like, my God. Have these people been to a fucking Comic-Con? Fuck! There are people 3 times my age there that are having the times of their lives in cosplay and wearing similar shirts to me, so get the fuck over it. Or wake up and smell the fucking coffee. Ugh! Anyway, there was a congressional hearing on juvenile delinquency, and this guy blamed comic books for it, when, very much like video games, it's on the parents and the kids to figure out right from wrong. That what you see in the comic book, you don't do in real life. Very much like video games. Now that's another discussion, but kind of connected on the same point. But I won't go into that at this moment. Can't believe there was a congressional hearing on this, though. Seriously. There did not need to be a congressional hearing. And this is what brought in the Comics Code Authority, and was what led to the Golden Age of Comics ending and going to the Silver Age of Comics, where comics were just overly censored and could not tell certain stories. And creators had to really scrape with what they could get. Batman became incredibly toned down and wasn't the dark Avenger, the Dark Knight, world's greatest detective that he was in his early days. He became more like the Adam West Batman, and Superman became a lot more tame, and there were just some oddball stories that were done because of the Comics Code Authority and Frederick Wertham and all this stupid ass horse shit. But yeah, anyway, oh boy. Along with characters like the Flash, Captain America had to fight communism, and he basically died because they couldn't really use him for too many stories. But I guess this wasn't all that bad because these restrictions did lead to some creators like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko creating some really amazing characters within these limits and using the limits that they had to tell good stories. Whether it was the Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, the X-Men, Avengers, Iron Man, Hulk, you name it. I guess, I'll say this. It wasn't all bad in the Silver Age, and there are some gems from this time period. Probably like my favorite comic book storyline. Well, one of them, my favorite comic book storyline ever, but definitely my favorite Spider-Man story, If This Be My Destiny. But yeah, this was when comics, I guess, were seen as quote-unquote innocent because they were following the guidelines, and the coming of the Bronze Age was when, I guess, that changed. But yeah, the Comics Code Authority had a lot of power, and they had to work within the limits, and it just got annoying. And I think once Jack Kirby left Marvel, that's cited as one of the turning points to the Bronze Age of comics. And also, there were some television shows and whatnot this time, but none that were really all that popular. That wouldn't come till the 70s with Superman 78. But the true end is seen as the death of Gwen Stacy, which I can definitely see. That really was the moment where comics just, wow, they became way more intense. Batman was starting to become the dark creature of the night, the world's greatest detective, the Dark Knight. Basically, all those nicknames that we know him for today started thanks to Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil. So, yeah. And I guess the Comics Code Authority started losing its power, and I guess comics were gaining more popularity at this time. So, yeah. Here are some highlights from the Silver Age. Or not Silver Age. Well, the Silver and the Bronze Age. But yeah, I guess by this point though, the Comics Code Authority, which I didn't explain too much before, but that was the response to Frederick Wertham and his stupid ass book, The Seduction of the Innocent, where he wrote a book with falsified data that he manipulated. Parents took it as fact, and this is what led to comic books being seen as childish or that they caused juvenile delinquency and so many other just stupid ass claims. I'll admit he did do some other good with his psychology work, so he's not all that bad, but these are some receipts that I'm keeping on him. He definitely isn't nearly as bad as Bob Kane or Rob Liefeld, or as I like to call him, Hackfield, because he takes way too much credit for creating Deadpool. And too many people overcredit him. He does not deserve the credit he gets. And, yeah. Anyway, the Comics Code Authority kind of became like the motion picture ratings for movies that the MPAA put in for movies in like the 1960s. So this is basically the same thing but comic books. But I guess by the 80s it really wasn't needed, and they kind of only put the approved by the Comics Code Authority little seal. Seal on comics that showed, or they kind of just put it there as courtesy or something like that. But yeah, at this time there was Superman 1978 as a real successful movie, and Superman 2, and not really very much after that in the 80s, not up until 1989 with Batman, the Michael Keaton movie. But comics wise, there was a lot of changing going on. The Bronze Age was beginning to decline, and the Modern Age, or also known as the Dark Age, began with stories like DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths, which rebooted the DC universe, and it brought Batman back to his dark roots, like redid his origin with Frank Miller's Year One. Daredevil at this time was beginning to have a lot darker stories told. Same thing with Spider-Man. I mean, just read Daredevil Born Again and Frank Miller's run, and gets quite fucking dark, I'll say that. Holy shit. Just about any characters. There were some real dark Avenger stories, like this one story where Baron Zemo beats the shit out of the Avengers. And he almost kills Captain America, too. Like, I guess he got the upper hand on him, but Captain America, by the skin of his teeth, survived. And it is just like, wow. It was a great story. Anyway, but yeah, that was seen as one of the turning point comics from this era. And then there's also Watchmen, the comic, not the movie, not discussing that piece of garbage that people overcredit and overglorify. And it was a box office flop also. I don't know why people are saying it's gaining a following, because it clearly isn't. But yeah, it was definitely a turning point. 1986 might just be one of the best years for comics. With that, Daredevil Born Again, and The Dark Knight Rises all coming out in this one year. But yeah, The Dark Knight Rises had some balls. What Frank Miller accomplished, wow. He made Ronald Reagan, the president at the time, a character and commenting on his policies during the Cold War, and made Superman a government stooge, just serving Reagan blindly, and Batman being the one to take him on. Like, wow. And also, oh, I forgot, in the 1970s, there was a lot of anti-heroes that rose to prominence also, like Wolverine, the Punisher, and many others like that. Rorschach from Watchmen. But yeah. Oh, and the X-Men had a real prominent time period here with stories like the Dark Phoenix saga and Days of Future Past and X-Men God Loves, Man Kills. That X-Men 2, the poster right here to my left, is was adapted from. And God, that story is fucking dark. And the movie definitely did it justice. Like, holy shit, that story... Wow, my God. How was I allowed to watch that movie as a kid, considering the source material they were drawing from? But, yeah. And then after this, the 90s had a few successful movies, like Blade for Marvel, and, well, then again, DC really didn't have too many. Yeah, the 90s wasn't really the best decade for superhero movies, because Batman Forever was the beginning of the end of Batman. Batman Returns, being pretty good. Yeah, Batman and Robin, we don't discuss that. But comics-wise, the 90s were not a great decade. They continued the dark trend, but many of the stories were just really try-hard or really stupid and were just done to shake up the status quo, only to then set it back to the status quo. Like the death and return of Superman with Doomsday, which was all just a big fucking publicity stunt. DC did it just to boost sales, so yeah. Oh, and Batman with the whole Nightfall thing where Bane breaks his back. Damn good story, but who they got to replace Batman and the purpose behind it was fucking stupid. And Spider-Man had the Clone Saga and how long and overdrawn that was. Ben Reilly's still a damn good character, but the Clone Saga was incredibly drawn out, mishandled, and I feel like the later Spider-Verse story is what it should have been. Spider-Verse is Clone Saga done right. But yeah, so many characters, stuff like that happened. I feel like the only character that didn't, like, suffer from terrible 90s artwork was probably Iron Man, because he really fit that armored aesthetic the 90s was pushing. And Oh, there were some other non-Marvel DC comics that became pretty successful in this era, like Hellboy, Image, Dark Horse. Oh, and Spawn. Spawn is fucking amazing. I love Spawn. Spawn is great. And yeah, so here's some of those lesser known publications. But yeah, these were all artists who kept getting, and writers who kept getting robbed by Marvel by some of their work for hire contracts and stuff. So Todd McFarlane, Hackfield, Eric Larson, and many of the prominent Spider-Man writers and artists, along with X-Men. Oh, and Jim Lee. Jim Lee's a great artist too, and what he did with X-Men. I mean, shoot, in the box behind me to my left, I have one of his X-Men comics that is a rare pull-out cover. So that'll hopefully be worth a lot of money one day. That actually came from the 90s and is actually a good cover from the 90s. The other thing too I've noticed is sometimes the story is really good in 90s comics. It's just the artwork is everywhere. It's hard to follow what you're supposed to look at. And then look at disasters like this that Hackfield made. So yeah, shit like this was not helping with this fucking perception of comic books being for children. But I don't think it really got bad until the 2010s with Martin Scorsese, because I feel like the 21st century is a much better century for geeks than the previous one. But yeah, I think comics were cited as one of the reasons behind Columbine, along with Doom and a lot of other things. And even Marilyn Manson kind of was like, yeah, no, my music had no involvement with this. And I can kind of agree with him, especially these false connections that were made to Doom and comic books. But yeah, the 2000s came along, and this was when comic books came into their own with movies like X-Men, Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, along with its sequel, and the Blade sequel, Blade 2, and various other movies that came out around this time, like Spider-Man 2, and the beginnings of Marvel. But they had their bumps around this time too with the Fantastic Four and that disaster. But yeah, the comics, they had some good stories from this time. One of them, which in retrospect isn't as bad as I initially thought, that being X-Men House of M. But there are some dumb ones like Spider-Man One More Day. I don't really want to go into that because I will blow a fucking fuse if I talk about it too long. Let's just say it was done just to make Spider-Man single. Fucking horse shit. It was literally done just to fucking keep Spider-Man single. The editor at Marvel admitted that he only made it because he thought Spider-Man was boring as a married man. Just stupid. Along with Thor, he wanted the Thor Ragnarok comic to be told because he said, well, we can't take Thor anywhere, so let's just end him. Ugh. Anyway, I guess here's a few images from those disasters. But yeah, near the end of the decade, though, this was when the meat of superhero movies rising to prominence, which I feel is definitely a big part on why it's become a lot more accepted to be a geek. And despite some people who, oh god, they never let go of their past prejudices against geeks or their negative feelings. Oh god. Anyway, probably was the beginning of the MCU with movies like Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk and The Dark Knight. Like those movies really helped and showed how much like the comic books and how they evolved in the 1980s and showed how dark and mature and adult they could be. These movies showed that and became popular, especially with Marvel taking a risk on RDJ. And yeah, uh the continuing of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I'm just gonna say it from the Infinity Saga, from Iron Man up to Spider-Man Far From Home. So, yeah. But I guess a few of the standouts that definitely helped, and especially with their box office revenue, definitely have to be the first Avengers, because that, I believe, was the first Marvel movie to break $1 billion. Iron Man 3, even though my feelings have come and gone, I still enjoy it, and it made over $1 billion, so that helps. And Captain America the Winter Soldier did what the Dark Knight did for Batman, did it to Captain America. Same thing with Captain America Civil War, which made over billions of dollars, and was the debut of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, which is mostly beloved. And his second movie made over $1 billion, that being Spider-Man Far From Home. And also Doctor Strange, another standout from this time. It didn't make $1 billion, but it showed Marvel could take obscure characters that aren't as well known and beloved and make them awesome, along with the Guardians of the Galaxy and many others. And the other last two standouts definitely have to be the movie that's on my wall to my left over here, not Back to the Future, but well over here, Avengers Infinity War, and to my right, Avengers Endgame. Those are some other standouts. But yeah, it's definitely helped, and the success of this, and a few of the DC standouts definitely have helped, like Shazam and all them, but unfortunately a new critic has risen, and he started a witch hunt that has only been furthered by more. I guess there are two figures. Bill Maher, fuck you Bill Maher, and Martin Scorsese. But yeah, anyway, oh my gosh, I already let my feelings out on Bill Maher there, so I got nothing else to add other than that. But he is just being a short-sighted jackass, and I hate it when people try to say, oh, he just likes to stir the pot. Don't be like that. Well, it doesn't fucking excuse what he said, just insulting the whole geek community like that. So, this is unforgivable, Bill Maher. It's why I don't watch your show anymore, and why I unfollowed that jackass. Ugh. And another director who I really respect, who to my left is my poster of Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese started his whole witch hunt against Marvel movies, calling them theme park movies. When, guess what? You compared the pacing of Goodfellas to a roller coaster! So your argument is invalid. Yeah, it collapses in on itself. It doesn't hold up. You can't say that anymore, so no. And the receipt is out there that you said it, so yeah. There's a video, look it up. He admits to it, so his whole witch hunt is invalid. And because of him, other popular directors are partaking in this bullshit also. James Cameron made some stupid-ass comments too. But then once Avengers Endgame broke the records it broke, he was all like, oh yeah, you guys are helping cinema and making it better. So he's a two-faced fucking hypocrite. And James Cameron, much like what Thomas Wayne said in Joker, has lost his way. Like how Thomas Wayne said Gotham has lost its way. For James Cameron has lost his way. And, yeah. Let's see, who else was there? Oh, Denny Villeneuve, a relatively younger director. I can't believe he's partaking in this bullshit. What the fuck, Denny? You've made some of the best movies of this decade. I thought you knew better than this. Fuck! And he uses some of the same visual effects that Martin Scorsese bitches about. That, guess what, have been a part of cinema ever since the beginning of cinema. And all CGI is an evolution of visual effects! And more often than not, most of these effects are combined with practical effects. It's a marriage of practical, visual, digital CGI mixed with practical effects. Not that fucking hard to know, all of you. And, it's one thing that's gonna suck when I finish watching Dune, knowing that Denny Villeneuve is partaking in this. And the worst one, which on my door right here, directed this masterpiece. Darn, my camera's not gonna turn. I don't think. Alright, just take my word for it. It's, Blade Runner. Yeah. My God, Ridley Scott. But yeah, he now is saying that superhero movies have boring plots and that they're uninteresting and they're mostly driven by special effects. You know, if I remember correct, special effects have been a part of your movies for the longest time too. And as much as we love the plot and characters, the special effects are a part of it too. Like with Blade Runner, like with Alien, like with Gladiator, and Black Hawk Down! All of your iconic films! You fucking hypocrite, Ridley Scott! I love your movies, but I'm keeping this fucking receipt on you now. Ugh. But yeah, the other thing too, Ridley, the whole MCU Infinity Saga, guess what? Me and many other fans would not have cried like babies at the end of Avengers Endgame right there if the plots were shit! If we didn't care about the characters or the story, guess what? We wouldn't have a reaction. So, you are fucking wrong. Ugh. Last thing I gotta say on this too. The Spider-Man Far From Home trailer. Or not Far From Home, No Way Home. Guess what? It wouldn't get the attention it was getting if Spider-Man's story wasn't so interesting and appealing. And if Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire come into it, then that just enhances the story and makes it better and more interesting. Oh my gosh. I'm going to say this. All these directors, they're basically old men yelling at kids to get off their lawn. That is all they're doing with this stupid-ass witch hunt. But anyway, despite that, I will admit, it is a lot better and easier to be a geek now with the rise of Comic-Cons and all this stuff, despite these morons. So, it's gotten a lot better. There's still a little work left to go, but that's why I keep saying with my podcast and everything, geek and proud and all that stuff. So yeah, just got to keep it going. But yeah, definitely with the Dark Age and some of the rise of these characters in the movies with the MCU has helped big time. And like before, we'll overcome these witch hunters. Because that's all this is at the end of the day. It's a fucking witch hunt. That's all it fucking is. And yeah, that is literally all these guys are. These men are just yelling at kids to get off their lawn. That is all they're doing. And I'm so glad there are directors out there who know better. Like my favorite, Steven Spielberg, whose name is on that Back to the Future poster behind me. And Quentin Tarantino, who has said he's a fan of Marvel and even wanted to direct some Marvel movies early in his career. And if he wants to come direct an MCU movie, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I love his style. Yeah, anyway, guess that's all I got. So, definitely a lot of improvement. I'm glad that when I went to school when I did, never was I beaten up or chastised or anything like that for being a geek. And quite frankly, I was kind of a mutt, a mixture of that, jock, and many other things. So yeah, and whenever I'd wear shirts like these, no one would really bat an eye or say anything. They're just like, hey, it's Jacob's style. It's what he likes to wear. But yeah, overall, it's come a long way and it's an interesting subject. And there are some YouTube videos out there I'd recommend watching on this. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed hearing my perspective because that's all this is at the end of the day. And anyway, hope you enjoyed this change of pace discussion. And I guess rest in peace to all the great comic book creators out there who proved these witch hunters wrong. Whether it was Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Frank Miller, Alan Moore, Walt Simonson, Chris Claremont, all of them. Oh, John Byrne, and all the great filmmakers, too, who helped. Whether it was, not Christopher, Richard Donner, Tim Burton, Jon Favreau, Christopher Nolan, Bryan Singer, and any other MCU directors like the Russo brothers, James Gunn, and if the current money that these movies are making still with the Phase 4 of the MCU and the success of the Suicide Squad, these movies aren't going anywhere. So these witch hunters, they can keep their witch hunt going as long as they want. It ain't gonna fucking change shit, so they may as well just get used to it. So yeah, I just wanted to let my feelings out on that, discuss my perspective. So anyway, I hope you like, comment, subscribe, and geek and proud. Peace.